Hello to Masterclass, YouTube Masterclass, run through Coursera for credits for USC, California Institute of the Arts, or Harvard. Check harvard.edu and especially Coursera.edu. And Coursera will lead you to how to get credits through a class like this. That's a master class. I'm Dr. Sheley. I got my PhD at California Institute of the Arts, and I'm on the staff directory over there. It's a permanent position, and we'll be doing this year after year. This is the final class, and we got the finals, economic versus taxonomic. I'm going to ask you to just simply write a 2-page paper about the difference between the need for special effects, visually and storytelling-wise, versus the need for special effects, and to their limit, always, in terms of business application. And those are very related things, because in business application, you're always finding ways to pay for the things that you're wanting to do with the product that you're vying for, which is the special effects. So if you make them, great, but it tends to be that if you attach them to a storyline, or attach them to a resonance in the film, or a meaning in the film, and that's why they're added to the film, but the characters in the film can see the special effects while they're going on. I mean, supposedly, while you're watching the film anyway, because it seems like they're in that world and they could see everything in it too, even if they're acting in front of a blue screen, and then they see themselves see everything in it later. One or the other, the character in the story, the avatar or the actor or the character in the filming of the story is going to be able to see everything going on, perceive in some way that these are special effects that are going off. I mean, sometimes the special effects are happening to them on their costume or in the air, like, you know, it could be fairies, pixies, and sprites everywhere, and you're trying to reflect that. Now, we're going to go kind of different than that, though. That's the final, and I think you'll all do good, because basically we just need an example of where special effects were used, and because of the commercial quality of the film, you could determine in what way they'd market the special effects, and in what way they'd use them best to fulfill the purpose in a case scenario that's already happened. Sorry, I couldn't make it any easier than that. They were asking for a harder test on this class, because my first two classes had not the easiest tests in the world, but they were getting a little redundant for those that were already in part one and still couldn't get past the first paper. And I'm not saying that these are easy classes, because there's so much that goes on. In fact, what we're doing today is not easy. We're looking at one that I don't really like, that I'd rather play the D.W. Griffith character and say, geez, I just want to move to and build Hollywood and be away from this guy, Thomas Edison, at the movies. And why I bring it up isn't really necessarily because of Edison himself or anything he had to do with, except hiring Edwin Porter. And I'm wondering if really Edison did anything else in his career that was noteworthy. I mean, he did all these experiments on film, right? None of them were films. It would be like having a box full of experimental films and no actual films. Well, they didn't come up with narrative cinema, storytelling cinema, until really Edwin Porter, with The Great Train Robbery, of all things. 1903, it looks like, and I'm looking at this going, so there's already been 100 movies, and nobody knows what any of them are about. I mean, I could show you these scary pictures of the things that are in Edison movies before Porter does Great Train Robbery, and now I'm just really interested, because I'm thinking some of these early camera tests might have actually been movies, but how many of these did D.W. Griffith have later, and how many did he try to take to Hollywood with him? Because isn't it somehow still in the Hollywood directory, these films, as well as, I'm not sure if these films would list as well as the films that started across the other side of America. And really, it's fascinating to me, but you have color in this one by Edison. That means a lot of these films, even up and The Great Train Robbery and beyond, were using special effects to sell their movies. Now get this, this was how they sold their movies, was having cinema of attractions. Now it wasn't quite cinema reenactment, like the brothers, the Lumiere brothers, when they first showed film in December 12th, 1895, then they had the actualities, and those were the actual things taking place that they would film. Whether they're shown later and they're not actually taking place anymore was part of the controversy. Like, does that actually have to take place every time you see it? Or is it even actively taking place? Is it something that's actively taking place and only a sphere seen on a projection, which was something that I think Edison really had trouble with, was finding a way to project any of this stuff. And by the time he got it projected, he had all those horrible letdowns, that electrocution of an elephant, which should have been special effects, and it wasn't, and it ruined the whole movie, and it ruined the cinema careers of many New Yorkers. And that's when D.W. Griffith left for Los Angeles and built Hollywood the Humane Society, being his Adventures of Dolly film and all those special effects. But if you think what's weird about Edison compared to Griffith is Edison really goes back to the beginning of time. And the beginning of time is around the time that the Industrial Revolution is taking place after the Renaissance, after the Enlightenment. And then there's the Industrial Revolution. And now we've got these hangovers from the Enlightenment. Like, what do we do with this industry that we now have called the medium of recreation of images? Do we stay in the attractions? Do we go the Méliès route, which Méliès is working at the same time as Edison, even though Edison got 10 years on everybody, because Edison was already tinkering with pre-cinematic toys. These two, not really movies. Like, when is the first feature? Well, Edison doesn't even make but one feature, and his is kind of atheistic and rude and stark, and about how everybody needs to join the military and die for a cause and be like some kind of martyr, you know. It's called The Uninvited, and I don't recommend it to anyone, but I do. And there's not many about special effects in that film, except people talking to each other about the shame thing, and that's even a silent film is questionable, because it is, but it looks so much like a sound film in terms of like a Duty Calls, let's make a Brickyard Western type movie, and I didn't really find much in the aesthetics of things. I'm not trying to diss Edison totally, because Edison does hire Porter, that being even bigger than the Griffith deal in terms of cinema history in a way is true, because Porter does invent a more kind of settled genre-based narrative film by the time we get to Great Train Robbery. And by the time we get to Great Train Robbery, we've had enough of the experimentation of everything to realize this is where we're going with film. Now, some of these films that he produced for people, like these after-school special type things, I'm not into, but some of these guys were just for fun, almost like in a B-movie exploitation kind of way. Those cinema attractions I don't really like, but I guess in a B-movie kind of way you can do that. Dream of a Rarebit Fiend is on this history, and that's true. I mean, you have to give him credit there. If he did produce Dream of a Rarebit Fiend, now that one has special effects, and I think we'll go through that really quick, because it's they're animators before the time of Mickey, and one of them did Dream of a Rarebit Fiend. Now, I want to say it wasn't, class, I'm failing you right now, and I'll have to look it up and get back to you, but yeah, there's 3 filmmakers at the time of, before Mickey Mouse comes out, and one of them is Otto Mesmer and Pat Sullivan for Felix the Cat. And it should give me some brownie points to say that before Mickey, there was also Emil Cole. But in the American terms of things, it wasn't even Dixon. It was this guy that made the Haunted Motel. And it's really funny that I do forget his name real quick, because I had a stud book around me that said who did Dream of a Rarebit Fiend and Haunted Hotel, and that he's the same guy. The only reason I'm letting it slide, not just because it's the end of the semester, but is that I was just studying his name the other day and it popped out of my head. So this may be 3rd or 4th block I've come up with, not the guy's name that made these movies, and it's too bad that they don't have it wrenched in here somewhere who made the Dream of a Rarebit Fiend. But I think it's important to know that the animator used live action to make a cartoon. Like, he lets, there's this bed that rises, and he's flying on it. This dude's like flying on his bed. And Donald Crafton, that's who did it. And you see the bed flying along the city. And the guy is sleeping on his bed, and then he wakes up and he's like surfing through the sky on this bed. And it's because of the rare bits that he had the day before of meat that put him in dreaming land at night. And now we've got this early animated special effect film that, like Great Train Robbery, which always keeps the concept of the train moving in every direction. We think about how the train moves both all the way to the end of it and all the way to the front of it while we're on it in a few minutes in Great Train Robbery. Then we notice that, like, in the middle somewhere, we meet with one side meets with the other and shoots at each other. We also know that down the way there's like some Dixieland, like Dance USA kind of thing going on in the hallways of Country Swing. And we see these flags and we hear this victory coming, and of course the train's being robbed all of a sudden by these, you know, it's like a 12-minute movie, right? I don't even know if it has that written down. 7-minute movie, you know, it's a real short movie, but it's like the best short movie ever made, The Great Train Robbery, because really that is to say it is the best short movie ever made, because it's like this one end and this other end are all coming towards the middle, and then for what? Boom, final shootout. There's shootout, we're all coming into the middle of it, and then blam, we're colliding. And meanwhile, these guys with the posse that are coming to stop them, they're having a dance hall first, and whether some guys don't get to go and some guys do is the arrangement of how they're sent out to battle at that time. And I can't tell you that Dream of a Rarebit Fiend's just wild, because he's flying through the air and he's dodging like Big Ben and everything. Like, he can hit his head on things that he's flying past in the sky. That's all. Like, well, if things are flying past him in the sky and he can still hit his head on them, then it's like, if he can hit his head on him, then he's got to duck, and then he's like, it's almost like you see this Little Nemo type thing. And Little Nemo, I know, is more of the H.G. Wells, like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea guy, but there's a Little Nemo in Slumberland, and it's like this Dream of a Rarebit Fiend thing where you're always in a dream, and he's always on his bed, and he's always floating around on his bed when he's in his dream. And I could see that so much being a precedent of this, like, cartoon ad of Dream of a Rarebit Fiend. And so we'll give Thomas Edison a few points back for having very little to do with that, but having to do with that at all, yeah, I can see him scoring points. And I'm looking through here, and it looks pretty much Rescued from an Eagle's Nest. Doesn't that sound like a D.W. Griffith film that he's in but not directed by Thomas Edison? This is getting interesting, because isn't that the first time Griffith was ever on film? And it wasn't a special effect of the bird grabbing hold of him and carrying him like a giant bird across down to a nest on the side of a mountain. Am I wrong that was a special effect movie with Griffith? Is it embarrassing to everyone that they did a special effect movie at the Grounding Cinema? Was it a cinema of attractions that we wanted to see this nesting bird bigger than who would one day be the biggest director of all? Come on now. We're not trying to bring anybody down. In fact, we're just setting them down in a nest. No, because if you can imagine with me the early silent film, and there's one where actually an eagle flies, like, picks up Griffith with its talons. Of course, Griffith's first film, he already looks like he does when he's directing Intolerance and stuff, you know. So they set him down on the first moment of Griffith's film history. We found it today. Isn't it lucky that we looked through this? I was going to throw this box away and just, like, curse on it and Burning Man it and everything. Even though Burning Man's not a curse, not a hex, but it's a spiritual gift to pass on a holy desire not to be seen by anybody, because it's too holy and it's too desirable. Think about it, man. That is the way of it. And look, the discs are in here. You think I didn't throw this away yet. This is good. But I didn't know Rescued from Eagle's Nest was good. So how do they do a special effect like a Méliès effect or a Rescued from an Eagle Nest? We know what they did in Great Train Robbery was had the guy, the cowboy in the film, point his gun, you can see it up here, point his gun right at the camera, and there's parts of it that are in color that they colorized. And he has his gun point right at the camera, and he shoots, and we're all out in the audience, and we're fine, but we still recognize that he's really shooting towards the camera, which is like acquiring it to be us that's getting shot at. And I feel that that's a technique used later. There's silent film effects later, and for instance, Goodfellas, when they do that same effect, Joe Pesci is already dead in the film, but he comes back at the very end as though he's like in hiding too, and then he shoots right at the camera, just like the Great Train Robbery. And he does that is one of those hyper effects of taking scenes from other films and putting them in your own. I mean, that's okay to do, because all the films suggest that credibility of an ability to take all the films from anywhere and put them in your own. That's an idea that's been going on forever that most filmmakers don't have a problem with. They wouldn't want you to just copy the film directly and say it's yours, but to take a film that as your own is one thing, but then to spread the own word that you can use clips or moments or even teach about these long clips of film. Well, they're expensive to us and they don't go without a price, but they can be had by intention of the meaning that these clips were used in, and the measurement of economy that we received back into the studio for keeping these clips afloat, and how expensive that is, plus how expensive it is to play it, is sometimes in quadrant with how much it costs to make, because how much it costs to make usually means it's playing everywhere, but sometimes it's only playing in like exclusive everywhere. This is where that whole debate begins. But I think there's something about the Dream of a Rarebit Fiend that has special effects. When you're seeing that, it's like, you know, Crafton's got the fake wall behind him with like the changing matte paints in the background that make him look like he's flying along on his bed somewhere, that make that character look like it's flying along on a bed somewhere. And that's a more special. And then they've got of course, his bed on suspended wire, so it looks like it's moving, like it's floating. And you can kind of tell that it's put on suspended wire in that studio, and that's how they make it look real, that his bed's flying along. But then we go into Rescued from an Eagle's Nest, and wouldn't this be the one with Griffith? Now, Griffith, you got to understand, is already tall and lanky, so now they've got to, like, record him in a way so that he looks smaller. And then you have the eagle come down from the side looking huge, and then swoop, and then you see it go, and just take off with him. And it almost looks like a cartoon at that point. Maybe it is, but with live action over it. And I know that there's a lot of that kind of Méliès circling the box office of these early films about special effects, and special effects in the original day. And really all we should be talking about is Méliès over there. I got this Méliès disc, and it's Méliès out. We watched it one time for a class a long time ago, and it was like every Méliès film, from A Trip to the Moon all the way through to The Black Imp, all the way through to his other films too. Méliès's got a lot of clever films, you know. He wanted to be a special effects artist. The whole idea of formalism, and really formalism is a modernism, is Méliès's circus of attractions himself, which is actually a magic show, because he didn't really like playing the part of the devil, but he played it more times than any other actor in history, because he was always locked into this mode that we're going to do something obscenely surreal and cutting edge, and like he was more subversive than we give him credit for. Like when they shot that thing to the moon, they're literally shooting a cannon at the moon that sends this giant trajectory pistol bullet to the moon that hits the side of him and still hurts his face. I mean, this is subversive, because even if we believe in Mother Nature getting hurt or whatever, that we're shooting people to the moon by shooting the moon is already a surreal evaluation of what it's like to shoot at the moon. And now we've got these apparatus that we already talked about, are like part cardboard creation with things projected on them, and part cartoon and image, and part of it's like the image blocks out. And like I said about the swinging parasol and the lightsaber, don't forget these things, class. But Méliès is what special effects are now, just as good. Inaugurated, inexempt, always inside the image of the film, and that the special effects were built while the film was being built is right at that simulacrum, right at that induction of when the effect needed to be there versus when the film was shown, because 1899 is the time that A Trip to the Moon came out, 1903. That's before the Great Train Robbery. I don't want to hear it. Formalism is in the Great Train Robbery with the fact that it's a period piece. It took place 20, 30 years before it was made, or even more than that. Probably, years before it was made, did it take place like that, and that's why they're recreating it. And now it has a story, because we embed these stories into it that are like, okay, now he's got to go to the barn for you, or he's got to go to stop the train robbery. And so it's like there are things that take place in the film that are along a storyline that is taking place in the Old West, and it's the setup of all the old Westerns. And I think there have been Westerns before, and I go through this Edison at the movies, and really everything's a breakthrough except for some of the films I don't like. And then later you think about that film Reefer Madness, and you're like, Griffith didn't want that film to be made. And I said, well, that's funny, because actually neither did Edison really, except he kept making films like The Uninvited and stuff that were all like even worse than The Struggle, like Prohibition, like I'm a demon and I'm going to keep everyone else having fun type thing. And I'm not saying that most demons don't let you have fun. And the demons I know, they're the let you have fun demons. So don't get me wrong with that, but like the fact that Edison was always like sapping the joy out of it and just casually determining it as nihilistic is probably we also needed someone to do that for the beginning of film. But you can appreciate, too, the narrative drive of the films, like Great Train Robbery, and The Dream of the Rarebit Fiend, and you can see that one, Dream of the Rarebit Fiend, right here, where he's holding on to his bed, and it's floating along in the sky. Yeah, I mean, it's bad, but, yeah, these films are all, empathy with the fact that Griffith would come out of them and Porter would shape the institutional mode of representation versus the standard mode of representation and the primitive mode of representation. But this mode of representation isn't the representation we're talking about later in like racial coded films about, like, for instance, there's a bad kind of racial coded film where you get, and it's a good movie, but it's kind of like let's just call it the Let's Frame Roger Rabbit syndrome, where all of a sudden there's segregation between human and cartoon. Now this is to make for our segregation of black and white, because what else was segregated in America than black and white? So now we know that the cartoons, being the ones that aren't as powerful, supposedly, because they can be exterminated of, and they've got to hire humans to not do it, and there's kind of this like racial coding that's not done in a smart way, because it's actually like putting groups further apart. And I'm not saying anything to decry Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's a great movie. In fact, I need to bring up the special effects. Because in Mary Poppins and Roger Rabbit, and there's that movie by Ralph Bakshi, Cool World. And we have live action and animated is really this standard that gets oppressed by those movies, and really all goes down to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and they always want to know who did the best. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing that they did the racial coding the way they did. I'm saying they badly coded it on purpose. They like make it like this film noir language, or like the detective language is hard boiled. So now everybody gets struck with the dark side, and nobody goes home completely untouched by the feeling of beguilement and evil. And it all goes into this segregation of the two and men. So when the kids see it, they're like, well, so that's what segregation was like. And now everybody's like, so is that what they really want us learning in civil rights classes years later about that? Or so what I'm saying is it's a great movie. It does that edge on purpose. It's like we're gonna throw even the civil rights movement at the book at them, and they won't even get us back for that. But I love Robert Zemeckis. I think he's a genius. Him and Ron Howard and Robert Zemeckis are like big in charge at University of Southern California, and like I would never defy anything they did, nor say anything was bad. The point is that it's hard to racially code the other way around would have made the tunes more superior, and then all of a sudden we're all having a hard time with the fact that we live under the reign of cartoonism, which the movie Fantastic Planet, not Forbidden Planet, Fantastic Planet, with all of its special effects, was about aliens ruling it over, man. I wonder if that's where L. Ron Hubbard got the idea, you wonder? No, it was probably before that, millions of years ago, in like some like hidden vault of a hidden treasure chest in the middle of a bunch of protons and neutrons and electrons. They were just all back there floating around. And that's what I feel like with these Edisons. It's like, look at this, the beginning of cinema. Here it goes. And it takes a real expert to be into your medium and be the one that actually found Griffith, and be the one that actually found Porter, and the institutional mode of representation came along when Porter had the primitive mode of representation right away, and when he was doing an American Fireman in 1908, and that might even be in here. But there's one scene of it where it's cut together wrong, and that's when the guy's going up a ladder, and there's a guy going up a ladder further, and it's him, but it jump cuts up the ladder. And some days films look good that way, but this is before the medium was really perfected or invented. So then we get to one that goes halfway up, and it cuts to the next one going halfway up, and now it looks seamless, because now it looks like it's a full trip up with a match on action, being the first symmetry we needed from cut to cut. And to move from cut to cut is beautiful in film. So that this guy goes right up here, right up the ladder, and it's in two cuts, but it looks like one. And that being the representational or representable, or that being the representation of general mode of intuition, standard general mode of representation, you know, primitive mode to general mode came pretty fast, because that's pretty much where it came along. I mean, if you made one cut matched on action that looks like the same dude moving at the same place, but you filmed it at a different time and place, then that is pretty much where you get that effect, that editing effect of seamless movement from block to block. That is where the camera is stacked in comparison to the other, but it's not really that, because it could be a mile away, it could be 2 feet away. It does have a lot to do with lighting, depending on where you are located, and that's true. But we're just saying that once the shots clip together, because I was explaining in a music video how with the thematic episodic range, and in a music video you can go from time and space to time and space to time and space, and change even the objective, or keep the objective clearly there as being the singer in the song. But in a music video, versus any other form, you're still matching completely the visual to the music. So you're going to that Kenneth Anger version of Inauguration of a Pleasure Dome, where you have the music following the image, or the image following the music. Now, to go back to that cool world, like, we're suddenly have live action with the action of the animation coincide, and then that's all got to go to a sound directive. But in the middle is where Ron Howard and Robert Zemeckis meet, because they're like, we're going to make this work. We're going to make this challenge work. We're going to take these challenging elements of a story, haven't set up special effects yet, haven't really built the world of the film yet, haven't built the set, but I can see it coming together day by day as we do that. And in the middle, it'll look like Carnival Jamboree. And at the end, it'll look like one little bric-a-brac is being filmed down to the last, so we can get the measurements of the lighting cues just exactly the way we need them. And that's like how both of those guys do everything down to the details, Zemeckis and Howard. And that's why their films do have special effects. Sometimes, always times to extenuate the story. Because I don't see, like, a director like Robert Zemeckis just saying, well, flight? Oh, no, the whole point of the film was just to see what it was like to make it look like a plane fly upside down. No, he would have gone further and said, we were seeing if it was possible to go from upside down and then land it right side up, if that was possible. And we tested it out, and then we made the special effect show what we tested out as plausible, and that it's plausible, not recommendable, not recommendable to anyone, but plausible and could save the lives of everyone, and that there was alcohol and all this social issue thrown into. I love it. I could eat it up. It's everything I want to watch about movies. This is Robert Zemeckis, man. I mean, you take Castaway and you have all these the special effects, but one thing that's cool about the special effect in Castaway is you have this mapped out small island that you can kind of follow around and see how the colors of the day and where the sun is located and where his shadow is rising, all these different elements they're taking into effect down to the littlest nuance on that island to be like this controlled island that Robert Zemeckis gods over, you know. You know what I'm saying? But, like, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And the special effects and Forrest Gump are countless. And when he's running through carrying people over his shoulder in Vietnam, running through the napalm and everything. I mean, these are invincible moments in film history. And then you take Ron Howard when he was working with George Lucas. And we could have talked way more about George Lucas in this class. But when George Lucas and Ron Howard did Willow, I thought they were when I was a kid, I thought it was better than Lord of the Rings. I was like, I hadn't seen but the Bashki version, which was great. I thought, well, this Willow, I mean, all that's where you get integration of special effects into the fantasy storyline. And that's why directors that do fantasies like Never-Ending Story, etc., they really know that the special effects are going to be really important for the capability of the cinema and the strategy of the cinema. The capability in the sense that it has to be up to grabs, that you can do that with the cinema, and going ahead and doing with that with the cinema is then the next realm. And you see that done as Willow is pushed along as both this knight in shining Middle Ages sort of Final Fantasy story, and then all of a sudden the next thing you know, Willow goes on to, like, it's gonna be this, like, trek with adventurers to stop the evil, to save the world, etc. And they fight dragons. Ron Howard has this one scene where, like, Willow and all his homies are fighting the dragons, and they'll, like, kill one, boom, and it'll blow everything up. Boom, 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 blew everything up. Because he can shoot fire, and these are special effects that are, like, at that time, they were, like, puppeted, but they were also computer guarded, but they were also animatronic, but they were also for each shot sometimes lap edited in, and some of them were puppets that we filmed some days later and added to the whole scene. And, you know, it's like they're building as they go, and it's like, again, you see a set with nothing on it. Halfway through the movie, you got carnival jamboree going on your set. Everybody's got their guitars out playing their best Jolene, and every like technical assistant agent is Jolene, you know, and you're having, and then then you set the guitar down and the guitar's still playing because they've got a reverberator over on your side of the set, you know, the whole place is going. And then at the end of the movie, everybody's kind of picking up that last piece that they've got to take one more picture of, even if it is the 3D goggles that make you only see clowns from when they were selling the book yet. And you're like, I want those 3D goggles, man. But I got to get them back to the studio. And I'm just telling you a little bit because, like, a lot of the times the graphics guys will want to work hands-on with the film if it's a lower-budget movie. Sometimes being a lower-budget movie can help because you can get more than one position within those movies if you're vying to be in one. So, like, if you're in a low-budget film, you may not get credited for it, but you may be the gaffer and the first technician of the special effects, you know, and have a cool special effect to bring to the film, but at the same time you were working on the set and you were also a production assistant in some respects. So you can see how these jobs get mixed. On a big movie, it's not really a mix of jobs. Like production assistant has a checklist of things to do. Like there's the checklist guy. He's got all the checklists of things to do. Then you got the production guys and production assistants and production, not just PAs, but the production team, the producers, the co-producers, the executive producers, the associate producers, you know, all of them, and they all do different things, and you should see how they all operate. But the associate producer can sometimes even deal with special effects, so you never know who's dealing with those, and a lot of times the movie, if it's being made, will be told up front. But here you have a specific job with a specific checklist of items of what to do during the day of the set. It kind of makes the film run smoother, and that's been a Hollywood way that I would attribute back to the Edison time. The checklist of everything we need to do, check. Even Great Trim Robert, like, did we shoot at the screen yet today? That's the one thing we needed to get to. Come on. So, you know, I'll be with you for 10 more minutes this semester, and then it's like we're back on break. So if we go back on break, do we teach Film Criticism 3? Yeah, because Film Criticism 1 and 2 went off without a hunch, and I think I can go in multi-directions with the kind of features that special effects offer you. It fits more into the summer opportunity class. Because the summer opportunity, you don't have to fit as much information into, and you actually would have to fit more information into these kind of fields of study. And if you did study it down to the minuscule, then that was the only thing you studied as expertise. That my expertise lies in criticism doesn't mean in a couple of semesters I won't be teaching just like about a genre, which is what I'm hoping to do, moving to like the genre field of study. Like, we could even study the whole Western again, or we could study the whole sci-fi film again. I feel pretty good about those genres, even musicals we could go through. So I'm going to do some classes like that down the road, but for the next year, it'll be pretty much like in the first run of these where we do film criticism, and we kind of jump around to topic, as long as we cover all the topics, and even with this all the class. Now, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about in terms of special effects, and that was something I brought up only in class 1 and 2, and that's the imaginary view field. Now, the imaginary view field is, I imagine it. You can't really see it, but you pretend you can, because whether there are blocks of atoms that hold together the pictures we shape in our head or not, it doesn't matter. You can kind of come with me and see that I'm making this square rectangle, this rectangle with multiple squares in it. You can see the multiple squares in it sliding around. And it's this rectangle. And if I think something like a flying duck, there just went a flying duck across my imagined view of representation. Whether I thought of it going by or whether I imagined it, How can I tell I imagined it? Because I was the one that created it in that representational view field for myself. If you could see it, you were just following my imagination, and it'll be like, well, it's got a strong reach of imagination. So now look at it your way and color it any color you want to. And I have like 3 little birds singing, drinking water, and they're happy. So now I see 3 little birds drinking water and they're happy. And now I don't see it as much, but I can get it back as soon as I pop open that field. So that's one exercise to work on your view field. Because if your view field pops up like this, and then you see what you last left on it, and it's 3 little birdies drinking water in whatever color you want them on, the chances of having, though, my same picture and yours is slim, because even though I have a boundary of representation, especially on initiative of that quandary, I don't have the license to say I know how to draw your imaginary birds, even if they came from a similar representation on screen. The representational mode, institutional mode of representation is basically the fireman story. Fireman can't reach the top of the ladder, but it's already there. Cut out the middleman. Now the fireman looks like he's had a steady movement. History has been invented. And what comes with it is the whole idea that match-on action is the key to classicism, or at least in a way to even modernism, and that is to keep the picture moving, you would match on an action. Edit to edit. So you're back in this instrumental view field, instrumental imaginary view field, and you can start to actually need one of those when you're an animator, or need one of those as CGI, so you can picture out. And they always send you these feeds on LinkedIn about what they're going to do for their special effect, and have me monitor a few of them, and I monitored a few, and I'm like, they're seamless, they're exactitude, there's nothing wrong with them, there's zero problems. I got 0 problems with your 3D animation digital domain. I gotta tell you guys, I got 0 problems with it. You know why? Because it's flawless. It's like at Wizards of the Coast when they tell me to analyze dungeons to see if there's weakness. I'm like, no weakness, no weakness, no weakness, flawless. And that's what it's like at digital domain. They all work together in such a coherent way, and they flow, and they know what they're going for, and they can see it on their visual, what they're going to put in the visual frame of the camera, and then do away with it because they've got other things they need to see, other worlds to dream, other dreams to conquer. You know, it's reflective of who makes the moves anyway. But all I'm going to say, it's a digital domain, and the Library of Congress and Wizards of the Coast is flawless in design. Like, no change needed, everything's perfect, everything you've ever done is been done sanely and according to a logistical point of view, without flaw, aiming towards further trajectory of bigger and better and beautiful things. And so I have to tell you that if it led me to Edison to get there, it wasn't that, because Edison, I'm usually so full of scorn that I would have missed the Dream of the Rarebit Fiend thing, and may not have even gone on to see Rescued by a Seahawk. Or no, sorry, there aren't such things as Seahawks, except in Seattle. Hang on. Rescued by, or no, we got to look up the title. I just can't remember. Rescued from an Eagle's Nest. So who does actually rescue G.W. Griffith? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the bird comes down to the eagle's nest and gets him out of there, and then sets him down on a mountain. Now, that might be more the film, and this just shows that it's either an eagle coming in and setting him in an eagle's nest, or taking him out and putting it back up. I've only seen it done it one way, and I've never really gotten into that film, because, quite frankly, the special effects are too primitive, but they aren't even primitive, actually, because by now the fireman's already climbed up the ladder the right way. But as I see it in my head, there may have been ways that cinema was created just from the imaginatory view field, which Emil Cole showed us how to color on later on with the invention of animation. The animation in video games and CGI all kind of go hand in hand in how they upgrade all together at the same time. Doesn't mean the video games are behind, because they're actually further along than any of them. They've got so many hybridized ways of playing games between picture and video, and every kind of picture and every kind of video and every kind of way there is, every kind of graphic and every kind of 3D, 2D background, every kind of throwback to overhead background, throwback to Legend of Zelda, all the way up to the Skyrim type thing. And the video game world all runs on special effects, and we learn special effects from video games, and the special effects are all inundated into the story, I'll admit that. We all know that most special effects, like in Final Fantasy II and everything, get transferred to the films, and that the films, not just because they're influenced by anime and all that, which they are, they suddenly get like better and brighter in how they bring about things like 47 Ronin with Keanu Reeves, and or he gets it going with his own anime level, that however anime doth produce the volume before it, you know. And that just means like how it affects other movies that are being made. And I think like all the way to M. Night Shyamalan with The Last Airbender. I mean, you have these graphics, these like avatars with James Cameron. You have these graphics that are just seamlessly involved in, like I said, flawless invention that's coming into this level. And we're accepting it, not just that it's golden, that it's great, because we love to look at really interesting things that entertain us. And that's what tells a story in front of us. To entertain us is a really interesting way of telling it. And that we use devices in film, which oftentimes are jump cuts and things like special effects, because we didn't expect them necessarily. And then to be expected, special effect world of, say, Total Recall, where everything's out in motion. Everything's like one big stuck effect, one world, one total look around this now comic book created world, they'll say. Like Stanley Kubrick with his Full Metal Jacket and its comic book approach to everything. You know, and now it's bad to be a comic because there's too many comics. Well, I don't buy it. There's not too many comics, we're just fine. There's not too many comics, we're just fine. In fact, I knew someone that had all the comics in the world. Not going to say his name. I do dedicate much of this to him. And most of cinema had that, you know, become comic book aligned around the time of the 80s, and still kind of is, and there shouldn't be any problem with that, because it's what people want to see in movies. And even if it's like the King Kong of the bunch, it's still going to pay for Citizen Kane, you know. So I can see why some people are saying, well, we don't want only comic book movies. Fair enough. But if all we have is comic book movies, that should be okay too. Unless we run out of every other kind of movie and have only comic book movies, which is where I'm going to break even and say I can kind of see that quarrel from both sides, because I love comic book movies. I'd watch them all day, but that they're my only thing that I want description of filmmaking I want at the cinema, not that I want some throwback to the primitive mode of 1899, right? Until Méliès stepped to the plate. No. And Méliès is quality, and I don't know how he died alone as a magician. And Méliès can make things rise on his stage through like pulleys, you know. He can make things fly and glide with pulleys on a sound stage. Big ships, yellow submarines. I mean, you look at the movie Yellow Submarine, and it's got this whole Méliès way of modernism that the ship is riding through, you know, and they had to film that 24 frames in a row per second. So it's going, you know, floating along, jump cut, follow the Beatles song, and that's what I was trying to say about matching up the music to the image. Is like, sometimes it's got to be dead on where the music hits, and sometimes it's got to be dead on where the picture hits. And if you float a movie on along the timeline it should standard, it could match the song just being looped in that format of image timing, being musically timed similarly, even in a total silent film. And that's just to make sure that the loop is hitting the part of the, not the music that's being like conducted in the orchestra out front, but the music is being met to of the rhythm of the filmmaking. That is so that the rhythm of the filmmaking actually could be why they're making the rhythm of the music like that. And the music can be made to match the image. And that's where we're so like, did he make the image to match the music? And then you get these Ron Howard types who, well, the music always matches the image at the exact same time anyway, doesn't it? Well, you'd be like dead in sync, and then you get someone like me, and it's like, well, I left track 1 down at the end, but I think it's the same track that came back when I had that guitar solo in it later. So I don't know what side ended up with, but people love to listen to things, don't they? And Ron Howard would come back at me if I ever told him that, and he'd be like, well, I disagree. I think all the music's matched up. Next case. You know. And so it's like, Ron Howard would be the one to watch a Godard film and be like, you know, that was a good placement of music. You could really tell like he was placing it in different times he wouldn't normally. And I mean, you know, that's not bad. If that's not bad. That's not saying a mean thing about him or him being naive at all, because he's probably done the Godard soundtrack was enough for him to learn how to do his own. I don't know that he was better in certain ways, because not necessarily that he dealt with certain mediums of kids films, which is good. I think kids films is all right. And sometimes the kids film directors can get pushed away, but then we get A Beautiful Mind and Da Vinci Code. And if I have to get anyone here disagreeing, then I have to let them go. But Beautiful Mind and Da Vinci Code were pretty fucking good movies. I mean, Ron Howard had this whole pillory of film, even with his film Far and Away with Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, and Tony Scott did that one that they were in, and Kubrick, etc. did Eyes Wide Shut with us. But Ron Howard always had his best interest in mind. And then Beautiful Mind is this really ambiguous movie, and the special effects are getting it to look like people are there that really aren't, and some of the angles they had to get and everything had to be computed out. And there's some things where he's deducting science and numbers, and you see all these powers shoot out from him to do so. But let's face it, Da Vinci Code had some real amazing footage to it. Like, all 3 of those movies, Heaven and Hell and the pair of Angels and Demons. Yeah, I thought those movies were intense, man. I thought for a Ron Howard trilogy, we're in it this time. We're in it to win it. And I'm not saying anything bad about his pillory of old work, because it still stands as like testament to what the medium can do, right? And we never talk enough about Ron Howard and Robert Zemeckis, but I felt I would end it with this, because we're always talking about Spielberg, especially James Cameron and George Lucas when it comes to special effects. That's because they pretty much designed the playing field. But that Robert Zemeckis and Ron Howard kind of came along and grabbed their own playing field of that medium. Peter Jackson, too, you know. Later, Peter Jackson would join, being about as old as the rest of them. And they would just carry the whole medium on their shoulder. Like, even in the times when there is no cinema, they will have cinema. And then there's also guys like me who champion the medium, who say the medium is great, but I'm not going to live up to the legend of, say, Ron Howard, who's one of the most courageous and amazing directors on the planet. I'm talking about him mainly in terms of the special effects, which are always akin to the story, as we've seen the world of Willow be built to its most carnivalesque, down to its minutest detail. So, but then whether or not he is like an imaginative viewing field, like we've come up with in this class, to say, well, this is what I want Troll Bridge to look like, and this is what I want the troll for me in the middle to look like, and then he's all trolling, you know. So you can see things in your imagination field, and then you can plot the points to them to a computer. It's like plot 1, plot 2, plot 3, plot 4 has the backside of this troll whirly-burly here. So we take this image and we plot it on an actual computer, which we can do with calculus, even plot points on a calculator. And then we draw the picture by plotting the points around, by separating a key of every 4 animated similarities. You have another plot point when it changes, or every 4. So you're plotting the points. And that just keeps them a little distance away, so you can fill in the points with the way you need to move. Hopefully it won't be too drastically moved from the points that are already plotted. And then you fill it in with your, make a puppet out of it, fill it in with your CG. Computer, make the outside of it look metal if you want, like a bomb or something, like that bomb in Oppenheimer. It's like stapled together. Don't hit it with a, don't hit it with a lawnmower, Oppenheimer. It'll screw it up. That was like the Barbie mix where like it's AI and Barbie's mowing over Oppenheimer's bomb. No, I'm kidding. Well, I hope that and speaking of which, I'm sure that cinema will have more for us plenty in the future. We all are hoping and expecting more great comebacks in film history, and more great, not just comebacks, but everybody's already here just making their ambitious projects that seem like they take so long, and a few of us have things out or whatever, a few of us are waiting for the right moment to jump. I'm sure all those filmmakers I talked about today, even Spielberg, weren't talked about enough in this class, that he relied on special effects since Jaws to do the blockbuster theory that he was talking about, the idea of Jaws and the idea of duel, a truck going off a cliff, and like a dinosaur screaming in Jurassic Park being like the duel following with the Jurassic scream. And Spielberg has this whole sentimentality that sometimes special effects are cool to look at, like sometimes special effects are really cool to look at, and that's what we like about them. So we love the special effects because that's what we like about them. They tell the story. They're really interesting to look at. They're fun to watch. A lot of them are like looking at a sparkler. You start the sparkler and you just want to watch it till it goes out. But I'm telling you, with all the film history we covered with special effects and guys like Spielberg and his Minority Report special effects, it'll last forever. And this time it's a sparkler that, like that little spinner on Inception, the sparkler this time never goes out.